But it worked. The blatant untruths that were told in the referendum campaign were believed. You could also mention what Boris Johnson said there about open borders and allowing anybody into the UK. That is simply not true, because the present legislation allows for deportation of unwelcome people in all sorts of ways, and many of the immigrants that he was targeting there are non-Europeans, and Britain controls that immigration already, whether it's in or out of the EU. So that, again, is simply not true. Well, I think there's probably, if there is a mistrust in the political class, well, Boris Johnson is a classic example of an establishment figure. So he might be a populist and he might be anti-establishment, but he is himself a classical establishment figure. But he has a history of not entirely being entirely truthful. When he was a journalist in Brussels, he invented stories to attack the European Commission, which were nonsensical. And he was actually dismissed. He lost his job because of that.
Yeah.
The popular press, the written press, the media, the tabloids in particular, the great majority of them are strongly anti-European, and they have been many, many years, and would report the same sorts of stories as Boris Johnson published, for example, in large part because the owners of that press are often themselves very anti-European. Murdoch is the classic example, who has a major media empire in the UK, and his political ambition is clearly anti-European. But there are others as well, other media magnates who are using their control over certain media to promote an anti-European message. Is it the fault of the media in general? I'm not sure. I think in many ways the television media was fairly balanced. I think the fault was much more with the politicians who were defending the Remain campaign, who didn't put across a sufficiently convincing message, and who had themselves been very critical of Europe for many, many years. David Cameron is the best example, who after 10 years of criticising Europe, eventually said, well, we must vote Remain. So he was contradicting himself. That was never going to be very, very convincing. So I think the fault lied much more with the politicians and the leaders of the Remain campaign than with the media itself. I think you mustn't blame the messenger. It's the root of the problem. It's the politicians.